let's just look at Lebanon. 380,000 people killed. Syria, 580,000 people killed. Yemen, 340,000 people killed. Sudan, 500,000 babies have been killed from malnutrition because of the genocide that's going on, which numbers have reached 2 million. Somalia, it's another 780,000 people killed. Ethiopia, it's in the hundreds of thousands just in the last 4 years. Congo, it's like 2 million in the last couple of years. How can I take you seriously when you're calling out 30,000 dead civilians, which every civilian who died in Gaza is a tragedy? Do not get me wrong. And if you, as a rational person, can't look at Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, and call that out and say, hey, this is happening on a much worse scale today, not yesterday, today, it's happening today. People in Sudan are going to die in mass today more than in Gaza, and nobody will talk about it today in August 15th, 2025. And the population of Gaza has increased since October 7th. This is the lowest civilian casualty rate in urban warfare combat history. It's a 1-to-1 death ratio. It's unheard of in any war zone in the world. So just based statistically on this, if you wanted to show genocidal intent, you literally cannot.
All right, welcome to the show, Tal. It's a real honor to have you here, man.
Thank you for having me.
Now, for those who happen to not know who you are and aren't following your amazing YouTube channel, do you mind just giving us a brief bio, a brief background of who you are so we all get to know what you're up to?
Absolutely. My name is Tal. I've been traveling the world for the last 10 years under the alias The Traveling Clap. I traveled to almost 80 countries in that 10-year career, being one of YouTube's bigger travel vloggers. When October 7th happened, I was somewhere in Southeast Asia where I kind of set up a home, and I just couldn't shut my mouth anymore. The travel scene, the travel vlogging scene at the time was very much PC, and you couldn't and wouldn't talk about politics or the dirty truth. And I never really felt like I fit in that mold amongst my other peers who usually came from Western countries, didn't really have the trauma or ideology of ethnic cleansing and war in their family's background. And October 7th, when I started getting labeled as a genocidal white colonizer, I decided to really step up to the plate and use my voice and my platform to dispel the lies that were coming out about not just Israel, but the Middle East and Mizrahi Jews in whole. And I'm really proud of the growth that we've achieved in the last almost 2 years now. It's been amazing. We're making changes on the ground. We're interacting with Arabs and Muslims and radicals and leftists all over the sphere to try to dispel the truth, or dispel the lies, actually, against the truth that have been labeled against my people.
All right, well, look, I'm going to laser focus on a bunch of the stuff you just said, as well as stuff that's recently unfolding, things that are in the headlines, whether that be Australia and the UK threatening to recognize a Palestinian state. We've also got the recent Tucker Carlson interview that's kind of set the internet on fire. I want to ask you about the mass breakouts of Islamist groups across the West, the protest movements and the violence and the criminal gangs. And I also want to ask you about the state of Christians being persecuted in Israel and get what you think is actually happening. I've seen some videos of Israeli Jews spitting on Christians, and I think it's outraged a lot of people. And this seems to be the talking points of Tucker Carlson. So we're going to get into that in a minute. But before we do, I want to sort of zoom out a little bit and just get your thoughts on what's been happening overall over the last 2 years, and give you the floor for as long as you want, 5-10 minutes, to really debunk some of the main lies that you think really need dispelling. What's really gotten under your skin? So you go for it, man. What do you think people in the West have gotten really wrong about Israel and about this conflict?
I think people in the West fundamentally misunderstand what the Middle East is. And it starts with, I think there's an element of racism behind it. And not because it's like a prejudice racism where people are like just evil in the West and they're like, you know, a bunch of people, or they just discriminate against the people of the Middle East. But I think it's just the image that's been portrayed about what the Middle East is. It's just been wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. What the Middle East is, what it was, how it got to where it is today. We've skipped over Arab settler colonialism throughout the entire Middle East and Islamic supremacy in the Middle East, just verbatim. We've skipped over it as a global community. We don't talk about it. We don't mention it out of fear of being labeled racist. And, you know, I'm uniquely positioned, and so are you, by the way, as two beautiful, bearded Middle Eastern men, to actually cover these topics, because both of our families have been persecuted up and down the Middle East because of Islamism and Arabism. It came hand in hand. And I want to preface the conversation by saying that everything that I do, all the advocacy that I do, all these talking points, maybe some of them will even sound on the border of discriminatory for people. Everything that I say is wound up with love. All of it comes and is delivered with a message of love. And even though it sounds like tough love sometimes, that's exactly what it is. I love this region. I love the people of this region, whether they're Arab or Muslim or Christian or Jewish, whatever they be. I love them and I want the best for this region. And I just see that my region, my land is falling into this pit of despair year after year, and it seems to not be getting any better. And people in the West keep emboldening a more negative change and keep supporting negative change in this region. And so I want to be one of those people who uses his voice. When I die, I want people to know that I was a person who used his voice for hopefully positive change and peacemaking in this region. Through tough love and peace through strength is what I believe in. But it really starts, I think, with this like label that's been plastered on the Middle East that is, this region is Arab Muslim. That's what it is. It's what it's always been. It's the region of the Muslims. It's the regions of the Arabs. When in reality, that could not be further from the truth. And I'll start off just by personal example of who I am. I'm what you would consider a Mizrahi Jew today. Mizrahi in Hebrew means of the East. So we're the Jews of the East. And that's because my family came from places like Babylon, ancient Babylon, or modern day Iraq, Iran, and Turkey. That's where most of my family was scattered through the diaspora after the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. The main part of my family that I'm really connected to is the Iraqi side that was born in Baghdad. And that's both of my grandparents on my mom's side were born in Baghdad in the 30s. And they were ethnically cleansed. They were part of the massive Jewish community, over 150,000, who were kicked out of their homes violently via pogroms against Jewish people in the 1940s, in 1941 to be specific, during an event called the Farhud, June 1st and 2nd, 1941. And we'll have more time to get in detail about specifically what happened to my family, but I say all this to preface, like, most people who are even watching this do not know that that was a thing. Do not know that there were almost 1 million Jews living in the Middle East before the 40s who were ethnically cleansed, many violently, from their homes. Between Morocco to Algeria to Iran to Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, we had what Palestinians call the Nakba of 1948, the independence of the Israelis. We had our own Mizrahi Jewish Nakba, this massive ethnic cleansing that happened, and some of which many Arabs are still proud of today, that they kicked us out of our homes. And they use let me just stop you there before you, because there's so much I want you to continue with there. Sure.
But isn't it interesting that the Nakba gets phrased, and something that we just continually have to remember, when the Nakba that actually happened with the people, the Palestinians versus the Israelis, was a war that their leadership caused through a war on the Israeli people. They lost, and then they're just forever going on about it. Meanwhile, when the Islamist groups do that, they celebrate it. They celebrate the ethnic cleansing and they rejoice in it as a victory. But do you find that there's a sort of double standard here?
Absolutely, it's hypocrisy. I mean, I've coined this terminology, but like, the Arab world bathes in hypocrisy. It's like literally, it sits in a bathtub of hypocrisy and it keeps pouring the water over it over and over again. And the reason the Arab world looks the way that it does, or the Muslim world at large looks the way that it does, is because it refuses to learn from its past mistakes. It makes a mistake, and then, like when you start a war and you lose a war, one of the things that you're supposed to do as a losing army is admit defeat, raise the white flag, and learn from it. Now, if you want to do a counter attack after in the future, then you do it based on the lessons you learned from what you failed before. But if you never admit defeat, then you can never learn from your mistakes that you made in that war. And that is indicative of the way the Muslim world looks today. It's this constant chase of, we won, we succeeded, because you have to save face. And we just saw this with the IRGC getting a complete ass whooping during this 12-day war, and admitting a victory, saying we won, we defeated America, we defeated Israel. There's never a way to learn to crawl out of your pit of despair.
Do you think that's because of the predominant religion that has gripped these regimes, where they have to feel like they are blessed by God in everything they do? Like, for example, when it comes to Iran, they view themselves as the kind of custodians of the world until the supposed Messiah returns. And
Yeah.
like until then, all authority is with them, and they've got kind of spiritual encouragement and guidance from their faith. And it's almost like with Islam, its claim is that it is the final revelation and it is the perfect thing ever. And yet, when you look at the societies that have been gripped by it, you've got the worst human rights track records, you've got the most domestic violence abuses, you've got like the worst economic output a lot of the time, apart from countries like Saudi Arabia that have been blessed with a lot of oil. Like there seems to be a kind of like the proof hasn't shown up in the pudding. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I always want to make the distinction between what is Islam, what is a Muslim, and what is Islamism / jihadism. And those usually come hand in hand with pan-Arabism and Arab supremacy. But I grew up around fantastic Muslims. And here in Israel, we're blessed to have 2 million Muslims living with us in the country in peace, some who serve in the army, some who serve in the government. I grew up around really fantastic Muslims. I have cousins who married Palestinians, who have Palestinians who are part of my family. So I can never discriminate as all Muslims. I've also traveled the world, and I've been to many Muslim countries where they're very moderate. But this form of Islamism that takes on this serious form of supremacy that is akin to white supremacy, to Nazism, is that cancer that causes these issues. It's one that is unable to look inside of itself and say, hey, we're causing serious strife. We're causing human rights violations. And it uses Jews as a scapegoat to pin those things onto it. It uses the Christians as a scapegoat as well. It uses the Assyrians and the Mandeans and the Coptic people. It always chooses the Kurdish people, great example as well. It always uses the person that's under as a scapegoat to blame all of its problems in society onto.
In terms of the Arab conquest that you mentioned earlier that we just don't talk about, what are some of the things that we ought to be talking about? What are some of the key facts? What are some of the moments in history that time seems to have forgotten? And yet really now is the opportunity to really be diving into this so that we can understand the Middle East.
Yeah, for example, and this has so much to do with modern events today, like when people have these issues with Israeli society or pin onto Israeli society being white colonizers, a colonial entity of the West. I always look and ask, how could we get to this conclusion when before 800 years in the Middle East, Arabic wasn't even a popular language, believe it or not. Even here in Israel, Aramaic was still being used as a protest to Arab colonialism and Islamic supremacy in this land by the locals, whether they were Jews or Muslims. Do you know that there were Muslims who had dialects of Aramaic that they kept speaking in this land, in Israel? Or back then it was called Palestine? Because there was this refusal to assimilate to the pan-Arab conquest, to the Arabist conquest of this region. And for example, when people label me as an Arab Jew, it's something that I have a very hard time swallowing that pill because, my family was in Iraq before Islam or Arab was even an idea. They were in Babylon when Babylon was Babylon, when it was a part of ancient Mesopotamia, when it was a civilization that had to do with the Akkadians and the Sumerians and the Babylonians and had nothing to do with Muhammad or with any of the prophets of Islam or any of the stories of the Quran or any of the Arabic or Arab conquest.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, well, what do you think would be some of the main facts that your average sort of pink-haired lefty on a university campus in New York would be shocked to hear when it comes to the Islamic conquest or the Arab conquest, whatever you want to call it?
I would say that first and foremost, the Quran is made up predominantly of the stories of the Old Testament and the New Testament. And that Islam, this is going to shock you, is a Zionist religion. Believe it or not. And for the pink hair lefty who sits in New York, who I've actually had the grace of being able to debate with on the streets of New York, is always shocked, and they end up leaving the conversation when you have a Middle Eastern Jew like me, whose family has been in the Middle East for generations, able to combat those narratives. And I usually combat them by asking, okay, let's look into the Quran. Let's look into your narrative as a pro-Palestinian, as this is all Arab land. Let's just say, let's erase the Phoenicians from Lebanon, the Assyrians from Syria. Let's erase the Judeans from Judea and the Coptic people from Egypt. Let's erase them all. And let's just say this is actually all Arab land. Tell me why in the Quran it refers to Israel 64 plus times. Why in Hadith does it refer to the land of Israel as the Holy Land? why in Arabic is Al-Quds, the name for Jerusalem, based on Bait al-Muqdis, which is the literal Arabification of the Hebrew word Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. And Ali, I think something that will blow your mind is something that I recently came across in my travels here in the land. I got in touch with an archaeologist who gave me some serious archaeological proof that I could travel the world and do my advocacy with. This is a coin, and I'll supply you with pictures later in case you need like HD pictures or videos of this. This is a coin from the Umayyad dynasty, the first caliph after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. On this coin, it says on the front here, La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God but Allah himself. On the back in Arabic, it says Muhammad Rasul Allah, which means Muhammad is God's prophet. And this is basically the terminology that you say when you become a Muslim. This is the basic tenets of the Shahada. This coin is 1,500 years old. This coin was minted by the Umayyad dynasty when they took and colonized Jerusalem from not the Jews, from the Byzantines. The Byzantines are the ones who colonized it from the Romans, who colonized it from the Hashmonaean dynasty, which was Jewish. So there's this massive gap in time. And when the Arabs colonized Jerusalem, what did they choose as iconography on their coin? I don't know if you can see it from there.
Explain it to me.
This is a 5-branched menorah that the Muslims used as their iconography on their Muslim coin that you cannot debate is a Muslim coin from the Umayyad dynasty. This is archaeological evidence. They put a 5-branched menorah, which is unequivocal proof because there is no other group of people on this planet that have ever used the menorah as their iconography besides the Jewish people. So I always say, even back then, the Muslims acknowledged that the land that they were colonizing was not theirs because they did not colonize it from the Jews. They colonized it from 2 other colonial entities.
Yeah. Well, I think, but this is the thing. It speaks to this whole idea that there is this large portion of history that we just don't talk about, and there is a popular myth that has been circulating for a long time now, but it's especially blown up over the last 2 years, that prior to 1948, prior to the reestablishment of Israel, the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims all just got along in peace all the time.
Yeah.
There was no colonization, there was no slavery, and it was just the Garden of Eden there.
Yeah.
What have they gotten wrong about that picture, Tal? Tell us.
The whole thing, Ali. The entire thing.
Go on.
It's the thing that drives me up a wall. Like, it's the whole "we lived in peace" narrative. It's become so popular since October 7th as well. Like, they always try to make it seem like they always want to say history didn't start on October 7th. It started in 1948. I'm like, no problem. We're starting history. We don't want to start on October 7th. It doesn't get better for the Muslims if you go past 1948 because there was pogrom and pogrom, massacre after massacre for about 1,000 years. So I always reference everybody who's listening this. If you want to understand exactly the scale of these atrocities that specifically the Islamic Empire committed against the Jews, and again, with context, there were times of great cooperation between Muslims and Jews where there was peace. But the overarching theme was dhimmitude, or being a dhimmi, which is very, very important to remember. Yes, while Jews at certain places in Morocco during certain caliphates, they held high positions in government and they were treated better, the overarching theme was dhimmitude, which means you are, by religion, by God's standards, a second-class citizen because of your religion. And so for 1,000 years, there were massacres after massacres. And what I want everybody who's listening to this to please look up after, Medium.com blog, crimes that Arabs committed from the 6th century till the 1900s against the Jews. It is one of the saddest websites you could ever read. I went on this once and I actually independently researched most of these atrocities. And I was sad to find that almost all of them I could independently verify were true. And it's just, throughout 1,000 years, random massacre of 50,000 Jews killed in Morocco. Another 100 Jews killed in Baghdad. Another 1,000 Jews ethnically cleansed in Iran. In Yemen, forced to wear yellow stars because, they're Jews. You know who the Nazis got that idea from? The Muslims. It's actually unbelievable how much abuse the Jewish people of the Middle East endured at the hands of the Muslims in lands that they inhabited for thousands of years before them. That's the part that blows my mind always.
Yeah. it is a scary thought to think that essentially what we saw play out in Nazi Germany was putting Jews to the state of a dhimmi, which was basically just learnt from the last 1,000 years of the Middle East and what was happening there. And huge amounts of colonization, huge amounts of Arabization. That's why Arabic is spoken like throughout the Middle East, and Hebrew is spoken in one tiny little patch of land. That's a sign of colonization right there. The slave trade was massive, far outreaching anything the West ever did, and spanning into Europe. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why we have the word slave. It comes from the word Slavic people, who were treated as slaves, and there was a lot going on in the Islamic empires, and it does blow my mind. But you are from a sort of Mizrahi Jewish background, and most people don't know anything about that. They don't know what that word means. And I was wondering if you can kind of explain what that means and your connections to the region, because as far as most people in the West think, Jews are this like white European group of people who have no business in the Middle East, and they need to return to Poland ASAP.
Yeah. And I will, by the way, I will be the first person to blame the Jews, and I really do. I've been so vocal about this since I started my advocacy. We are at fault for our terrible PR, because Jews in America, I really believe this, have been at the helm of representing Jewish people and Israelis for the last 100 years. They've been in charge of our PR, of how we look, and they have chosen to completely ignore, unfortunately, and also we Mizrahi Jews, we're responsible for this too, that we didn't push ourselves to the forefront enough. But American Jews and Western Jews have really been at the forefront of ignoring the Jewish story from Ethiopia, from sub-Saharan Africa, from East Africa, from the Middle East, and just focusing on only Holocaust and anti-Semitism in the streets of the West, and none of what happened in the Middle East and Africa. And so what I do with my agenda and my advocacy is I speak specifically about what you're asking for clarification on. Mizrahi Jews. Mizrahi Jews are the Jews that have sort of been thrown into this title, into this label of Mizrahi, the Jews of the East, that encompass the Jews from Morocco all the way up to Iran. Now, there's different subgroups, like the Iranian Jews or the Persian groups are kind of like their own subculture. The Babylonian Jews, like my family, are their own subculture. And there's so many little subcultures in between, but colloquially, we're known as the Mizrahi Jews. And we were a group of about 1 million Jews that inhabited this region for thousands of years, who never left the Middle East. We always stayed in the Middle East, and we watched empires change as time went by, with always this desire and belief to go back to Jerusalem one day. Not Zionist in the way that you think of like the Zionist political ideology, but Zionist because that's what our religion, that's what our faith, and what our culture dictates us to do, is to eventually go back and liberate ourselves in our homeland. So we're that group of people that stayed in this Middle East, in the Middle East for all of time. We never left. And the West and Western pro-Palestinian or pro-Arab supremacist advocates will label us as Arab Jews, when like literally, I'm not joking with you, Ali, like 90% of us were there for thousands of years before the Arabs were even an afterthought. That's the part that blows my mind, that drives me crazy.
Yeah, because that's one of the terms that I've found strange, Arab Jews, because it doesn't seem to be an accurate description historically speaking. Now, one of the things that I've loved from your channel, and you've helped debunk this for a lot of people, is the origins of the keffiyeh scarf. And I can't do this conversation with you without you exposing that to my audience. What bugs you the most whenever you see that scarf being paraded around?
The thing with the keffiyeh is really funny. There's a bit of a backstory to it. It's now become like known as a terrorist scarf. Like everybody attributes it to being a terrorist scarf. But in reality, like the keffiyeh, or the shmach as it's actually called, or a sudra as it's called in Hebrew, it's just like this is a very common Middle Eastern garb that people all over the Middle East wore. But it originated in Mesopotamia as the shmach. And actually, you can trace the name back to its origins. Keffiyeh comes from the city of Kufa, which was a city in Iraq, or ancient Mesopotamia. That's how you get to that name. The design that the Palestinian keffiyeh has today is actually an ancient design that's been used, and it has a lot of callbacks to ancient Mesopotamia, and I'll explain what the design is right now. But it's so funny because the second I started creating content about it and it started going viral on the internet, Like I have a video on Twitter, I think it's nearly 1 million views explaining this in one of my lectures. I immediately saw this rise in pro-Palestinian propaganda, like taking the narrative away from the Mesopotamian explanation and saying, no, these are actually olive trees and olive branches, and this is the Silk Road. And I'm like, what? What in the world? How are you guys so fast with your propaganda? It's insane. And the reason I know about this story, by the way, is through my advocacy when I started speaking up as a proud Iraqi Jew, as a proud Mizrahi Jew. Ethnic minorities, from people from ethnic minorities from all over the Middle East, like Mandeans and Coptic people and Assyrians, started following me and cheering me on from behind the scenes. They have to do it silently, of course, because they're in danger everywhere they are in the Middle East. But they've started reaching out to me to almost be like their spokesperson. They've pushed me since, God bless, I have Israel and the IDF behind me and the Mossad behind me to protect my life, because I actually am a target now of both the IRGC and radical Muslims all over the world who want to kill me just for speaking up. I have this backing. I have my army, which was a dream for the people who lived in the Middle East, like my family who lived in the Middle East, or Jews who went through the Holocaust, or Ethiopian Jews who were discriminated against for being Jews in Ethiopia. I have that dream. I have that reality that I can actually use my voice and speak up for them. And so through that, specifically Yazidis, Mandeans, Assyrians, and ethnic Iraqis who don't subscribe to Arabs, to being Arab, explained to me the story of the history of the keffiyeh. And actually on the keffiyeh, there's 3 different patterns. The black and white keffiyeh that's made famous as the Palestinian keffiyeh. It has a design that has 2 stripes going down the middle, which signify the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, who are famous in the Bible. These are the lifeblood of Mesopotamia, of ancient Babylon. It's actually the rivers that my grandfather swam in as a kid. I have photos of my grandfather swimming in those rivers, which is the most amazing thing in the world. So that's what those 2 lines represent. On the other part of the design, there's these fishing net patterns, who the Palestinians are now calling olives for some reason. So clearly a fishing net. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I know.
But the fishing net is actually a callback to the ancient fishing people of the marshlands of Iraq. They actually still inhabit those marshlands today, and they still use the same keffiyeh design today. So that's what that callback is to. And then there's another part of it that is these beautiful ripples that are supposed to call back to the ripples on both the rivers and the lakes that these ancient fishing people used to inhabit. And you can see this is a very indigenous design that's rooted in the truth of Mesopotamia. And these people, again, the Yazidis and the Mandeans and the ethnic Iraqi people, or the ethnic Mesopotamians today, they still use this. And they're shocked by how much hate is now subjugated upon them because of wearing this scarf that has an attribution to terrorism.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much you've been following the culture wars over the last 8 to 10 years, but one of the things that has always gotten so much attention is this idea of cultural appropriation being just this big no-no. You just don't do it. So if there's a Halloween party and someone's dressed in a kimono, or if someone's dressed as a Native American Indian, you're going to get canceled, you're going to get fired, and you're never allowed to work again. All of a sudden, October 7th shows up, and every white kid in London, Paris, New York, LA gets one of these Middle Eastern scarves, and suddenly we're just okay with that. And there's another layer to this where the Palestinians have appropriated it from the Iraqis.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of that has blown your mind, but it's just whenever I see it, I just think okay, so you don't actually have moral rules. You're just creating codes that suit your agenda whenever you want. It's just this floating morality. I don't know if you found that to be the case. But.
Absolutely, it's complete and utter racism and hypocrisy. You will choose, for example, if you wear dreadlocks, they'll say, hey, you can't take that because that's African culture. And you can't wear cornrows or braids because that's African culture. But I'll see those same exact people, that same ideology, donning a keffiyeh in support of Palestine. When I'm like, hey, that's a Mesopotamian scarf. You're literally culturally appropriating for a violent purpose. You did not get permission of those people to use that scarf. And actually, those people who are the silent majority, they cannot speak up for their own culture now at fear of being killed. They're telling you from behind the scenes and using me as a spokesperson. They're saying, get that off your shoulders. That's not yours. That's my culture. That's part of my family history. You're not allowed to use that and chant from the river to the sea because it has nothing to do with Palestine. And Ali, I can back it up, not just because of these stories that were substantiated to me by these people, But actually, if you look at historical documents, if you look at pictures, you will really not see many Palestinians or even people in the Levant using that scarf before the 1930s. In Iraq, you will. When you look at pictures of ancient Iraqis, or not ancient Iraqis, but Iraqis from the 1910s, 1930s, 1920s, you will see them wearing that exact pattern. In Palestine, it only becomes popular after 67 when Yasser Arafat, an Egyptian terrorist, started using that scarf and promoting it as a sign of Palestinian resistance.
Yasser Arafat's a very interesting figure. How do you think he's shaped the region and created the kind of conflicts and tensions that we're seeing today? Do you think you can trace it back to Yasser Arafat?
It goes actually a little bit further. It's even more interesting. And it directly ties into why my family was ethnically cleansed, by the way.
Let's go into it.
It's a very fascinating rabbit hole. So there's a man named Haj Amin al-Husseini. I'm sure you're familiar with who he was, no?
Just explain it to us for our audience who don't know.
So Haj Amin al-Husseini was the precursor to Yasser Arafat. He was the only historical leader of Palestine, whatever that actually means. But he had the position called the Grand Mufti. He was kind of like a religious and political leader of Jerusalem in the 30s during the Ottoman Empire, and right around the time of the British. And Haj Amin al-Husseini was a Nazi. He worked with Hitler. He actually met with Hitler multiple times in Europe, and he devised a plan to, after Hitler would ethnically cleanse the Jews from Europe, to come and get us, the Mizrahi Jews. That was the next agenda. That was the next plan. So when Haj Amin al-Husseini met with Hitler, he installed these ideas in his brain of, let's start disseminating your Mein Kampf, your Nazi ideology, into the Arab world. And what did they do? They translated Mein Kampf into Arabic until it became the best-selling book in the 30s on the streets of Baghdad and Cairo. I'm not joking with you, Ali. That actually happened. And there were Hitler youth groups popping up on the streets of Baghdad. And that's actually what ended up culminating in the Farhud in June 1st and 2nd, 1941 in Iraq. So actually, if I have a bone to pick with anybody as to why us Iraqi Jews ended up coming back to Palestine or to Israel, it's literally because a Palestinian instigated it. A Palestinian brought us back here, not anybody else.
Yeah, wow. When I spoke to Einat Wilf on the show last year, I think it was. No, not last year. Yeah, at the beginning of the year. She was describing how if it wasn't for the state of Israel existing, that pogrom would have turned into just a huge genocide, the likes of which would probably rival the Holocaust. Because thankfully you now had a place to go. Whereas the Jews in Europe, there was no place to escape to. They had no kind of a state power. And so that is really interesting. And it does kind of strike me as weird as well, how the Palestinian, authorities have been offered a state many times and refused it. And Yasser Arafat was one of the guys that was refusing it most heavily when I think Bill Clinton tried to create some peace there as well. For people that don't know and still think that a two-state solution is the be-all answer to this and it's never been tried, could you give us a brief history lesson about how much times land for peace has been offered?
Yeah, it's I don't know the exact amount. I think also theorized it has a range. Like it could be anywhere as low as 6 on official documents and as high as 20 on unofficial documents with behind-the-scenes meeting. But by the way, one of the reasons why a two-state solution never could have really been struck with Yasser Arafat or with Mahmoud Abbas right now, with Abu Mazen, is because their precursor and the person that they call back to, even today, Abu Mazen calls back to Haj Amin al-Husseini, the man who met with Hitler. And Yasser Arafat was a direct disciple of Haj Amin al-Husseini. He was like his apprentice. He learned from him. He learned a lot of his ideologies, political ideology, from Haj Amin al-Husseini. So that Nazism has crept all the way up to 2025 to the point where you have stores like Hitler 1 and 2 that are popping up on the streets of the West Bank, which is a real thing, and in Gaza. Yeah. So these two-state solutions, I think I can see the positive thought behind them, because as modern nation states were becoming a thing and everybody was sort of running to create nation states for this group and for this group and for this group, the intention by the global community was correct. Let's create a state for 2 people, one for the Arabs, one for the Jews. The problem was, when we look at it ethically, there were already 20 plus Arab ethno-states created in the Middle East, and 50-something Muslim states. I would call them Muslim supremacist states. Not because they're all egregious towards other people, but because Islamic supremacy is the law in a Muslim state. That's just how it works. So you have these 50-plus Muslim states, 20-plus Arab states. I think from its inception, from its birth, this concept of a two-state solution was immoral. It was unethical. The idea of looking to the face of all the ethnic minorities in the Middle East, like these Assyrians and these Kurdish and these Copts and these Mandeans, and telling them, you know what, you guys wait, we're going to create another Arab state for the Palestinians, who 70% of Jordan, by the way, is a Palestinian state that is being occupied by a Gulf Arab. If people don't know this, King Abdullah is a Gulf Arab who is occupying Levantine land from the Palestinians.
That never gets mentioned in the,
never
occupy, end the occupation.
Never. No, it's like a completely absolved talking point. And by the way, I can say this as somebody who appreciates King Abdullah and what his family has done, because they are Gulf Arabs, like truly ethnically Gulf Arabs and not Jordanian, whatever Jordanian means. They actually have shown like a desire to cooperate with Israel because they get it. They're trying to follow in suit like the Saudis and the Emiratis, the Halijis, the Bahrainis. They want to follow in suit and create a peaceful existence. But 70% of their nation is Palestinian. They are literally occupying Levantine Arab land as a Gulf Arab. It's like the most absurd occupation and colonization that's still going on today, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody wants to mention it.
Yeah. Wow. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of like what hasn't worked and why it's not working because of the ideology that's gripped the region? I mean, you talked about Nazism kind of seeping into the kind of Palestinian leadership, but is it really as simple as that? Is it really just this mix of kind of Nazi sentiment and kind of Islamic supremacy that has meant that there just can't be peace?
I want you to think about it like this, Ali. I'm going to say something that's going to sound very controversial, and for everybody who's listening, this is going to sound controversial, okay? But I want you to just do the thought experiment with me, and you tell me if I'm wrong for thinking like this. Gaza, in 2005, was given back to the Palestinians for peace. That was the deal on the table. Immediately on day one, when they took Gaza, I remember seeing this as a kid on TV, because it happened in my lifetime. The first thing that they did was destroy every single remnant of Jewish life in that land. Whether it was a synagogue or a kosher supermarket or a greenhouse, they took every infrastructure they had and they destroyed it because Jews were there. The year after, they elect Hamas a terrorist group, and a couple months later, they're already attacking Israel with rockets. It's an immediate shift. There was no pauses. It was just like, let's go straight for the terrorism. When I look at Gaza today and how, unfortunately, the civilian situation there has gotten very, very bad, and there is starvation, and there is death, and there is suffering. There's mass suffering by the civilians there. There's been this attempt by Western media pundits and even people on the pro-Israel side to infantilize the Gazans and say, look, they're protesting against Hamas. They don't want Hamas anymore. They're fed up, which means they're going to be Zionists or they want peace. In reality, what I want to propose to you is this idea, and we're talking about Arab supremacy. We're talking about Arabs' inability, unfortunately, to lose or to admit defeat. What I think is actually going on in Gaza when you see Palestinians revolting against Hamas or protesting, it's actually them just admitting that Hamas as a terrorist group is now leeching off of them and is losing, so they're not powerful anymore, so they don't want to follow them. But the ideology of Hamas is Palestinian ideology. It's infiltrated and disseminated through the UN, through UNIFIL, through UNRWA, through other aid organizations were actually just covert terrorist operations. They have infiltrated this ideology and allowed it to fester in places like Gaza, in places like southern Lebanon, in places like Iran over the years, and allowed this really rife anti-Semitism, hatred of the West, hatred of Christianity, hatred of Western values to just bubble up in there to the point where, now even if Hamas gets overthrown, the ideology of Palestine is Hamas. So it might just change its name. It could be something else. But they're not revolting against Hamas because they hate Hamas or because they hate the ideology of Hamas. They're revolting against Hamas because Hamas is losing. And I can prove it, by the way, with one last point. There's a reason why for 19 years there has not been an election in the West Bank. It's not because Abu Mazen is inherently corrupt. He is, Mahmoud Abbas. But it's because he knows, and by all polling data, Hamas is the most popular group in the West Bank, and they would win an election.
Man. Dude. It's sometimes when stories are so blatantly clear and devastating, it's just so hard to believe that it can be like that. But what I found is that, particularly, and I'm speaking from a Western perspective because I grew up in the UK and now I'm in Australia, and both of these countries are now threatening to recognize a Palestinian state, whatever that means. I mean, like, and also just, and how they're basically incentivizing more hostage diplomacy and more terrorism. And the guy who's like leading Hamas has literally said that Australia and the UK saying that they're going to recognize this is the fruits of October the 7th. Mm-hmm. But it does seem that the West is just, it believes that the way it sees reality is the way other groups do. That what motivates Western culture is what motivates the sort of Arab world. And it's just not true, because the Western world is operating from a very materialistic, very secular, atheist kind of direction where it's about profits and material comforts and, you know, that kind of stuff. Whereas for the Palestinians, this is not what's motivating them necessarily. It's jihad, it's the afterlife, it's the 72 virgins, it's what's in the Quran. It's just a different data set. It's just a different modality, a different priority list. And it's just such... It's like watching a slow motion train wreck, watching these Western leaders think that they're helping when they're actually they're going to cause more conflict going forwards. Like them doing this is just going to cause more conflict. Just like them going into Afghanistan was just it just hasn't done anything good. You've just now armed the Taliban with all these like billions of military aircrafts. Same with Iraq, same with Libya, same with Syria now. It just seems like the West just has no idea what to do with the Middle East, and it's just trying to do something, and it's just making it worse every time.
It's like what we started this conversation with, Ali. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the region. You had a good friend of mine on recently, Mansour Ashkar, and Mansour and I, have become really close in the last year, and he's actually really guided me as an Arab Israeli. He's guided me in understanding the Arab world on a deeper level. And he had a conversation with me once and explaining to me how Arabs actually engage in warfare and how they submit to a loss. And it's the rounds of violence, without getting into the fine detail, the rounds of violence you have to go through to get an Arab army to submit or to say, we've lost, is so extreme, it breaks the barrier of every single conceivable notion of warfare. I mean, when they're raising the white flag and telling you you're surrendering, in Mansour's words, you have to hit them the hardest you've ever hit them. And then when they're begging you on the floor, there's nothing left, you hit and you deliver the worst blow you've ever delivered. Because only then, when there's no doubt in your mind that Allah is going to somehow redeem you from this horrible condition that you're in, only then can you actually allow yourself, your soul, to submit to your perceived enemy. And it sounds terrible, and it sounds violent, it sounds genocidal, and it sounds so bad to the Western ear. But when you actually understand that that's how Arabs in this region will tell you to fight, that's how Arabs in this region will tell you, listen, Habibi, that's the only way you can defeat us. That's the only way you can do it, is if you wreck us to the core and there's nothing left. That's the only time we'll give up. If you're not willing to take it there, you got to get out of this region. If you can't, if you can't make it here, you're not going to be able to survive.
Yeah. One of the things that I think has been interesting to observe as well is that as the West has gotten away from its traditional culture and its traditional values and faith and into this kind of more secular dynamic, which has been good for all kinds of trade negotiations and countries kind of just trying to find peace through different routes. What's been interesting to see is that it views religious civilizations, religious communities as like really dumb and backwards, and it can't contemplate that they have different things driving them and incentivizing them. And so the way it views religious people is that look at these guys believing this man-made created story, and everyone who believes in this man-made story, whether that be, the Bible or the Quran, look how stupid they are. Meanwhile, from, like a jihadi terrorist perspective, he's saying, look at those guys with their man-made human rights laws and their man-made policies and they've made up stories. Look at how much they put their faith in that, which they've just created. Look how dumb they are. And that they just don't seem to be understanding that what you might value here in the West is just of no concern to those people. Like war crimes, they don't give a crap. Like, this is just not the way they operate. They don't care, So when Israel is trying to combat in a war with a group like that, and they're just getting the West constantly on their heels, saying, "Look, you just bombed that building. Look how terrible." It's like, well, do you want us to win this war so we can end the casualties forever, or do you just want this thing to perpetuate over the last 50 years just like it is? And it seems like the West wants it to continue. No thanks to the United Nations funneling billions into Hamas's pockets via, UNRWA and things like that. So it's a tragedy, and honestly, I don't know whether you have any vision of how we're going to get out of this, but from my perspective, it's just, unless we have a fundamental, radical shift in perspective, we're doomed to see this war continue for the next 100 years at least.
But you hit it on the nose right there. That's exactly what we need. Unfortunately, it's what even Jews are not willing to do, because I have deep conversations with Jews and Israelis about this all the time. To get out of the current position that we're in, the very shitty position that we're in and that Palestinians are in. And by the way, I will be the first Israeli to tell you, we are committing actual injustice in different parts of the Palestinian territories. It's bad. We shouldn't be doing that. We need to be looking towards a better future, and we need to actually be acting upon it. And we've been doing things wrong with good intentions, but we've been doing things wrong for a long time. It's going to require a radical shift in how we think about this whole region and this whole conflict and this whole two-state solution thing to get us over to the other side. I really believe it's rooted in a one-state solution where we have to repeal democracy the way that we see it today and fit deeper into the Middle East and stop being sort of a proxy, or at least feeling like a proxy, representing ourselves as a proxy of the Western world in the Middle East. We need to be looking to our neighbors, to the Arabs, to the Halijis specifically, and the Hijazis. While their nations are not perfect and there's bad things that happen there every single day, I'm not going to whitewash it, but we need to be looking at them for also some advice and for some hope, and trying to work with them to build a model that will work for the people of the Middle East first and foremost. This country needs to be a Middle Eastern country.
Well, would you mind sharing with my audience some of the things that you, as an Israeli, think Israel is doing wrong? Could you list out a few of the things that stick out to you?
Absolutely. The situation in the West Bank has gone on for way too long and needs to be there needs to be a solution put in place. Like, I really believe it's rooted in declaring sovereignty over the West Bank and killing the idea of a two-state solution once and for all. Like we mentioned in this show already, I don't think there's any moral or ethical argument to be able to create a Palestinian state. I think it's wrong. I think it's morally corrupt for all the people of the Middle East. But also because if you ask the average Palestinian, I actually just had a Palestinian on my show last night who confirmed this to me. I said, if we give you a state in the West Bank, what's the first thing you guys are going to do? Get an army and attack Israel, which means we'll be back in exactly the place we're at right now, just in a couple of years. Israel will have to defend itself, and it will win. And so Palestinians will be in a position of suffering again. So I think the morally correct thing is declare sovereignty over the West Bank and kill that idea once and for all. So the international community cannot put it over our heads. And again, that you were asking me, sorry, I got derailed. You were asking me specifically, what are those things that Israel is doing wrong? That situation in the West Bank is wrong, because while I will never call it an occupation of somebody else's land, because the only country that was ever there was Jordan, and when Jordan was occupying it, nobody cared. So now that Israel occupied it, nobody should care either.
Well, and just for clarity, that's why it's called the West Bank, even though it's on the east of Israel. It's the West Bank of Jordan. The Jordan River specifically. But I think that what's going on there, the military occupation that is in place, could be replaced with a system that would work so much better for all of us and actually be able to create something fruitful. Because regardless of how you like it or not, like right now in the West Bank, people are coexisting. Like something, Ali, for example, I'm sure you've never heard of this because most people never talk about this. But, in the West Bank, in cities like Ramallah, Nablus, and all the different refugee camps and stuff, I've been to a lot of these on the ground. There's no Jews living in any Palestinian city in the West Bank. But there are Palestinians living in Jewish settlements, in Israeli settlements. Did you know this?
There's Palestinians actually before October 7th in the city of Ariel, which is the biggest West Bank settlement. There's a Palestinian who had a hummus shop who used to live inside of Ariel. Not only that, in Ariel University in the West Bank, there are Palestinians from the West Bank studying in a Jewish settlement university and getting degrees and building their homes. It's like the most backwards reality in the world. So I think that just morally, it's corrupt what we're doing there. We have to find a solution.
So you think Israel should just say, right, enough of this like tension. This is just ours. Like just go.
Yes.
Like, is that just like this is ours? Israeli flag. Just like all this fighting. Like that's going to shock a lot of people.
Of course,
to hear that they're going to think, well, you know, you're just doing exactly the thing that we've accused you of doing. You know.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, people have accused us of settler colonialism since day one of the state's creation. But I mean, like the only settler colony that exists is the pan-Arab conglomerate that exists in the Middle East that is oppressing every single ethnic minority in the region. And by the way, I think many, many Arabs in the West Bank would be ecstatic about the idea of living under Israel. Because just the alternative right now is so much worse. Like the PA is really, really oppressive towards Palestinians.
Like, okay, but paint the picture for us. Like when you say like that'd be like it'd be a worse nightmare essentially if it's the opposite, and they'd be ecstatic if it was the Israeli state. Like paint a picture for us. What would happen if like the Palestinian authorities or Hamas or whoever got in charge of that? What would that look like for your average family living in that a Palestinian-run region?
If Hamas got control of the West Bank,
yeah.
Well, it would be October 7th on every single Jewish settlement. Like this is a known thing. Every single Jewish settlement would be razed to the ground, and a lot of the settlers are armed, so it would basically be like a little civil war. But unless the IDF stepped up into, defend the Jews living there, it would be an October 7th massacre. And then it would immediately go to rocket launchers. And I need people to think about this, and you specifically, I need you to think about this geographically, because it actually involves, the country that you're ethnically from. Iran, if the West Bank takes control, or if the Palestinians take control over the West Bank, there is a direct supply line from Tehran to Ramallah to Nablus. It goes Iran, Iraq, Jordan, West Bank. Like, it's a direct line. There's no more funneling things in through Gaza. There's no more shipping things randomly underground in tunnels. It's just, you give them a country, it's a direct line. And that means ICBMs, that means hypersonic missiles, that means tactical nukes in the West Bank. It's indefensible.
That's end of story. In terms of, like, if people don't want World War III, if people want de-escalation, if people want more lives saved, it might actually mean just giving Israel West Bank.
Yeah.
That's going to be... And people don't like that, though, dude, because people just don't... Well, first of all, people hate Israel. People hate the Jews.
True.
For all kinds of complicated conspiratorial reasons.
Yeah.
Like the aliens are running the world or something, It's like people have all kinds of made up stuff. But what they are really not willing to do is say that Israel winning is actually going to create peace and a good thing, and it's actually going to help the Arabs long-term and even short-term. Like, it's just going to be... I can already tell people watching this are just going to like, huh? You can't do that. You can't let Israel do something that we've accused them of doing, because that's,
There's an incredible advocate. You have to have him on your show if you haven't already. His name is Yishai Fleischer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with who he is.
No.
You got to have him on the show. He's amazing. And he always coins this talking point of, when Israel was loved the most? In 1967, when we, for a lack of better terms, when we kicked the asses of all the Arab countries who were coming to murder us. When were we loved by the West? In 1948, when all the Arab countries came to murder us in a genocidal war, and we won. Yeah. When did they love us the most in recent history? When we did the beeper attack against Hezbollah. That's when we became popular for a week. Everybody was like, wow, that was impressive. So actually this idea of thinking like small Israel needs to be like small and be democratic, and no. When we're kicking ass and we're badass and we're actually winning and we're expanding, I'm not saying like we need to be greater Israel, but when we're expanding our borders to secure borders, I'm sorry, I have no more mercy in my heart left for Arabs, specifically like, for example, what we saw in Syria. When Arabs lose control of the land that they've had for 100 years and use it to do attacks against Israel, who is not bothering them, I'm sorry. If you attack us from that land and we conquer it, in my opinion, ours, that's it. No more talking. We don't need to have a conversation about it. You've had access to this land for 100+ years.
Yeah.
You're choosing it to do warfare. It's ours now.
Yeah. Could you imagine if, like, you had like Scottish people or Italians or like Polish people that like had this little bit of land and it was just not working well for them, and it's just constant chaos and civil war and dictatorships, and then like the moment they get anything, they're just like launch pad for rockets and terrorists and like boom, 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 and then they keep losing for 50 years, and then someone goes, look, enough of this. We're going to take control of the land and actually create peace. Like, no one would have a problem with that.
Yep.
But because we're talking about Israel here and the Muslim world, it's just clashing for people. Like, I don't know what it is, but it isn't working for the West. And maybe we need to stop caring about what the West thinks,
I also think the Israeli leadership it's terrible. Like, our Israeli governance has been, and honestly, and again, with good intentions for the last 50 years, has been useless in this manner. There's been a lot of attempting, a lot of trial and error, but realizing that's nothing working. And honestly, for the last 30 years, our government in Israel has just been sitting with their hands like, we don't know what to do. So they're just not doing. And that's not a solution. Yeah. Not doing is also not a solution. And Israel is complicit in not trying to solve the problem.
Yeah. Well, apart from the West Bank, which is this contentious issue, like, what are some of the other issues that you think Israel is getting wrong? I mean, Israel's getting accused of genocide and starvation and all that kind of stuff every day. What are some of the misconceptions that are really just frustrating you and grinding your gears when it comes to that?
I love the conversation of genocide so much because it's literally the most ridiculous talking point, especially in light of everything else. And I'm going to quote to you some crazy statistics now, but everything else that's happening, not in faraway countries, just like right on the direct borders of Palestine. But let's talk about Gaza for a second, and then we'll get into the hypocrisy. In Gaza, this claim of genocide keeps getting thrown around. I've had such an issue with this, and I really try to understand the pro-Palestinian perspective from their shoes. I try to go in there and understand where they're coming from when they say genocide. But any which way you cut it, it just comes out as a farce. Let's look at the numbers real quick. Since October 7th, 2023, it is claimed by Hamas, the Gaza Health Ministry, okay, which is run by Hamas. It's the only organization on the ground counting the bodies. They claim their highest numbers are 60,000 dead. But they make zero differentiation between a combatant and a child and a woman and a man. So much so that Yahya Sinwar was found on the list of dead women and children earlier last year.
Wow.
Which, for people who don't know, Yahya Sinwar was the head or the mastermind of October 7th and the militant leader of Hamas. So just so if we put it into perspective, that number that keeps getting floated, that people keep yelling, 60,000 dead Palestinians, there is no differentiation in that number between Hamas combatants and civilians. Now, Israel, at their highest, has said that around 27,000 to 30,000 combatants have been killed. Now, because this is a debate, right, and nobody can trust both sides, let's just take both sources at their highest number. 30,000 dead combatants, 30,000 dead civilians. That means that 60,000 people have been killed, but 30,000 of them have been civilians. For almost 2 years, according to John Spencer, who is like a very, very popular military analyst who, he knows his research better than you or I ever will. He's quoted several times, somebody who's actually been to Gaza and studied this inside out. This is the lowest civilian casualty rate in urban warfare combat history. It's a 1-to-1 death ratio. It's unheard of in any war zone in the world. So just based statistically on this, if you wanted to show genocidal intent, you literally cannot. But the thing that to me is the most astounding, Gaza has maintained since October 7th a positive birth rate of tens of thousands of babies, to the point where that nearly 70,000 babies have been born in Gaza since October 7th. 70,000. The population of Gaza has increased since October 7th. Now, people always say, well, in Auschwitz, the population of Jews has increased. Yes, but how? Not by babies being born, by more Jews being trained into the concentration camp. So when you want to try to find genocidal intent in Gaza, we have to look real quick at the surrounding area. Let's just look at Lebanon. 380,000 people killed. Syria, 580,000 people killed. Yemen, 340,000 people killed. Sudan, 500,000 babies have been killed from malnutrition because of the genocide that's going on, which numbers have reached 2 million. Somalia, it's another 780,000 people killed. Ethiopia, it's in the hundreds of thousands just in the last 4 years. Congo, it's like 2 million in the last couple of years, last 3 or 4 years. So whenever I'm looking to have a debate about this, I'm always like, especially when I'm speaking to Muslims or to Arabs, it's like, you want me as a Jew to take you seriously, right? You want me to look to you as my brother. You're my Muslim brother. You're supposed to be my superior. I'm supposed to look up to you as a Muslim. How can I take you seriously when you're calling out 30,000 dead civilians, which every civilian who died in Gaza is a tragedy? Do not get me wrong. Me and Ali will both sit here and condemn that day in, day out. It's a tragedy that has to happen. But my blame falls not on the IDF. It falls on Hamas for starting this war. And if you, as a rational person, can't look at Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, Libya, or not Libya, Lebanon, Syria, Libya as well, and call that out and say, hey, this is happening on a much worse scale today, not yesterday. Today, it's happening today. People in Sudan are going to die en masse today more than in Gaza, and nobody will talk about it today in August 15th, 2025. That's going to happen today. No one's going to talk about it. Yeah. That is immoral. That is a lie. And that's why I always say Palestine, free Palestine, it's a scam. You're being scammed out of your attention, out of your social media, out of your brain power. You're being scammed to think about something, this cause that's being inflated to take up so much of your brain space. Yeah. When all over the Middle East, on the direct borders of Palestine, the worst atrocities in human history, people are being burnt in tires alive in parts of Africa, in some of these conflict zones. Alive in tires. It is not the same as a kid unfortunately getting hit by a rocket as collateral when they're not being aimed for. Or for Israel accidentally killing people from the World Central Food Kitchen and then apologizing for it and saying this was a mistake. It's horrible, but it's not equal. It is not the same.
Yeah, Tal, and we need to go further on this because we need to remember that this is also the Islamic world. Like if people are saying that the Muslims are being oppressed and whatever, like they need to remember that all these countries that we just talked about are more Muslims being killed. It's like for like comparisons. But we need to bring it back to the Gaza issue again. Could you tell us how many people have died in all conflicts in the Israel-Gaza conflict since it all began? Do you know that rough figure?
Yeah, you want to be shocked. It's baffling. Okay. It's roughly between 150,000 to 170,000 before October 7th. Around 25,000 Jews and the rest Arab, around 150,000, 140,000 Arabs.
Right.
Can you understand? That's a day in Sudan. That's like a day. That's a couple weeks. That's a good month in Sudan. Yeah. It's baffling the hypocrisy.
Yeah. If this just what we just talked about here in this entire conversation doesn't make someone just stop and go, okay, look, I care about Gaza. I care about those children. I want them to have food. I want rockets to stop falling on them. I want all of that for them. I want peace for them. I want all the things I want for them. My heart still breaks for them. But if you can't hear this and go, maybe a portion of my attention pie needs to go to all of this other stuff. If your brain isn't going there, like I don't know what to say to you. You know, we're talking about figures in their millions. We are talking about the deaths of children in their millions, in their hundreds of thousands, you know. And it just baffles me. And I think this is just flat out debunked, end of story, why this entire Palestinian cause has been turned into like a Ponzi scheme or a cult or a whole thing, which is just, it's no longer rational. It's no longer logical. It's no longer actually serving the very moral codes that you yourself want to hold yourself to. You know, you care about dying kids? Well, look at all this other stuff. But I'm afraid there are a lot of people out there that are just still not going to care.
It's absolute hypocrisy, and it's like, I mean, it pales in comparison to any conflict in the world. You want to go former Yugoslavia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Albania. You want to look at Kosovo. You want to look at Turkey and the Armenians.
There we go.
Azerbaijan.
Why don't we talk about that? Why don't we talk about, just for a moment here, the occupation of Cyprus? Okay. Why don't we talk about the Nakba that the Christians experienced at the hands of the Muslim Ottomans, the Muslim Turkish people? Like, look, I could talk about this all day, but like, is there anything you want to say about the comparisons between the kind of Turkey, Greece, Cyprus thing and how you can compare it to this, you know?
It's funny because the Ottomans oppressed us also. Yeah. You know, like when I read a little bit of the history of how the Ottomans treated the Jews, it was terrible. For 400 years, the Ottomans kept on, like, yes, there were periods of times where it was good, but I recently went to Armenia, and when I was in Yerevan in the Armenian Genocide Museum, I was reading a little bit about the systematic killing of Armenians, and it was so reminiscent to me of how Muslims treated us in the Muslim world, of this dhimmi status. And they roped Armenians with Jews and Christians so often. It was such like a common occurrence. And again, like there's things on the Armenian side that haven't been 100% kosher also. I can condemn both. I can say that both things were bad.
Two things can be true at the same time. Yeah.
Two things can be true at the same time, because I spend a lot of time in Azerbaijan and I found it to be a lovely culture and a lovely place with incredible people who also have genuine grievances. But here's the reality. There's been a systematic, and it's a trend that keeps following itself at the hands of this Islamist idea. And it happened in the Ottoman Empire, it happened in the Arab world. And if we don't put a stop to it by actually calling it out, not just doing this fake wokeism, performative activism for Palestine, if we don't actually want to end the suffering of people in the Middle East, we need to call out what's actually going on here. We're all being oppressed. And Israel, whether you like it or not, if you see it as settler colony or not, it is the only country in the region that is made up of predominantly an ethnic minority that is self-determining in their land, in the land that they come from. Yeah. You would wish the same thing that Israel did for the Assyrians and for the Kurdish and for the Mandeans. And guess what? When they would do it, the Arabs and the Muslims would do the exact same thing that they're doing to Israel. They would call them Nazis, they would call the Kurdish Nazis, and they would call the Mandeans Nazis, and they would say that they're ethnically cleansing and that they're occupying because they're self-determining in the land that they're from as a small little ethnic minority.
And look, like you said, like whether you hate Israel for whatever reason, like I really couldn't care. Like I'm sure you don't care either. Like I don't care if people don't like Israel. I just really couldn't care less. What fascinates me is the hyper obsession of hatred for Israel. And look, like there's a whole conversation within the kind of Christian world about various interpretations. I think it's called dispensationalism, where like certain evangelical Christians or Protestant Christians read certain things into scripture, and then that's caused a split where people are like, no, like, Christians don't just need to support Israel. Like just move that aside. And I literally just view it as like, if Israel loses this thing, this will become a stronghold for an ISIS-like caliphate. Absolutely. And guess what? They're not going to live content lives just eating their hummus and pita bread. Like that's not what it's going to be. Like it is.
That was racist. Yeah. That was racist.
Well, we can kind of say that, but it will be a stronghold for terrorism that will expand into the Mediterranean. And next it'll be Greece. It'll be the Christians there. They're getting rid of the Christians in Syria. It'll be getting rid of the Christians in Egypt, and then it will just keep moving outwards. That's what that's the front line right there. That's the front line.
It's an existential fight, and to be honest with you, man, as a Middle Eastern person who lives here, it's an honor to be a part of the fight. Like I'm fighting one part of it, which is like sort of the media knowledge part of the fight, like the intellectual part of the fight, not the actual physical fight on the ground. But it's an honor to be a part of this fight because it is the biggest blessing in the world to be able to fight for the liberation of my region. Like, I see Arabs, people don't understand this because it looks like I'm angry and I hate, but I really have so much love for the people of the Middle East in my heart. From Iran to Morocco, I love Absolutely. These people because they're my family, and I want the best for them. Yeah. But what I want the most is I want the Persian people to be able to be Zoroastrian again if they want to be able to unlock who they actually are. I want the Mandeans to be able to practice their polytheism if that's what they want. The Yazidis to go back to their culture worshipping birds and spirits. And I want these people to be able to unlock who they actually are and realize who they actually are without having to feel like they're forced to be an Arab or to be a Muslim because somebody has their boot on their neck and telling you have to be this way.
Yep.
It's an honor to be a part of this fight.
All right, well, look, let's not beat a dead horse on that any further. I do want to move on to another topic, which you're going to love, which is the issue of Tucker Carlson, or as he's been termed, Tucker Carlson. And, so he put out an interview recently, I'm sure you've seen it, where he interviewed a nun from Jerusalem, and it's just gone crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but I was really curious to get your first impressions.
Yeah, I mean, listen. There's a reason why he's being called Carlson. It's blatant propaganda. Like it's funny because it's propaganda that's not used to make the Middle East better. It's not making Palestinians' lives better. It's not actually showing light to real suffering of Palestinians, because if so, he would have had a Palestinian nun on or a Palestinian monk or priest on, and then I would have had more respect for this interview. He had a foreigner from a different nation who's come to the land and has obviously been corrupted by Hamas and by Palestinian radical Islamic ideology, and is now putting the ideology of Christianity, of working together with Christians and Jews under the table in pursuit of demonizing Jews in the eyes of the West. Ali, there was one purpose for this interview, and that was for Americans, specifically American Christians, to hate Jews. That was the only reason this interview happened.
Yeah, yeah. And what's shocking to me is that, like, for all the persecution that's happening to the Christians right now, it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I cover a lot on my Instagram. Whether that be the persecution in Nigeria, in Eritrea, or Somalia, in India, in Pakistan, in North Korea, in China, just like name literally every country where Christians are taking root in a country that is run by either like a communist regime or an Islamist regime, where they are suffering, where they're being persecuted, where their churches are being blown up, where their families are being decapitated. Like, of all the things to talk about, he's talking about stuff in Israel that is just really not that, like, there's really not much there. Like, we're just not really talking about much here. So I'm sure you've seen the video of Israeli Jews like spitting on some Christians. I don't know if there were some nuns or something, but that is all the right wing, sort of Christian right wing are talking about. But in that same video, like, those two guys, like, they get in trouble with like the police that are there and everything. And so I don't know what's going on, but I'm just really curious to kind of get your thoughts on what's happening to Christians in the region, and whether you think Tucker has a point, or whether you really just think this is all just propaganda to try and make Christians hate Israel.
Well, Ali, we have to address this point first. How do you know that it's propaganda funded by Qatar? You just addressed like 2% of the atrocities happening against Christians in the world right now, and there's so much more happening, and he's not mentioning it at all. Whose number one agenda in the world right now? Which group of people is the number one agenda of toppling Israel? It's the Arabs. It's the Arab, this pan-Arab supremacist framework. And so, of course, if there was an actual care about Christians, and by the way, I have a serious criticism I wanted to bring on your show about Christians in large. We'll get into it a little bit later. And it comes from the heart, but it's a serious criticism. But if it was actually about Christians, about suffering of Christians, by the way, Israel is not the only Holy Land. Syria extends into the Holy Land. So does Egypt. These are sites that have been around from the time of Jesus and before that are important to the Christians, all over Jordan. Why is nobody talking about it? Because this is propaganda pushed by a foreign entity that is trying to make you think a specific way. We know that the IRGC and we know that Qatar has infiltrated Western institutions, universities. We know this. The paper trail has been exposed. So, of course, what is going on with Tucker? It's clear-cut, verbatim propaganda. Now, for the whole Christians getting spit on situation, I'll need to explain it from the perspective of a Jewish brain. Jews are an extremely traumatized group of people. Like, generational trauma after generational trauma. And that doesn't excuse behavior like this, but it adds a context. Many Jews in Israel, I think people like to sometimes, if people infantilize Arabs, they do the opposite to Jews. I don't know what the opposite of infantilization would be, but they make us up to be like these evil geniuses who like are just super, super smart and like are technologically savvy and flying around on hoverboards and stuff here in Israel. In reality, our nation is made up of a bunch of Hooga Booga cave people. That's how I coin it. I'm a Hooga Booga cave person. That's what I consider myself. And 70% of this country is Hooga Booga cave people. We're not all working in high tech. We're not all making, microchips and farming cherry tomatoes and drip irrigation. That's not Israel. Israel is a country like everywhere else. And amongst Israel, we have racists and we have radicals. And we have deeply corrupt people. We also have family men who have racist thoughts, but are nice people that you would probably sit down and have a barbecue with, like every single country in the world. And so when you look at Israel and you try to say, well, they have to be perfect, you're a racist. You're being racist. You're being discriminatory against one nationality. Yeah. So, yes, there are Christians who get spit on, especially walking through the old city. In that clip, that specific famous clip that went super viral, I think it was a couple of years ago, I never totally got clarification on whether those Christians were missionary workers. Now, that doesn't excuse spitting on them, but there's been many cases now, especially since the October 7th war, where missionaries from the West are flying into Israel with bullhorns and like yelling Bible verses in English at an Israeli population and trying to have debates with them on the street when they already feel very, these are people who feel very like on the defense always because the world hates them. And Israelis are notoriously hot-headed people, where 70% in this country made up of Mizrahi Jews and Ethiopian Jews, Jews from Africa. We are not culturally Western. We are not culturally democratic or secular. We are religious, and we are a spicy group of people who come from the Middle East, and we behave as such. I'm not excusing the behavior, but I'm saying if you were to go to Saudi Arabia with a bullhorn and start preaching about the Bible, what do you think is going to happen? Imagine doing it in Pakistan. People need to stop framing Israel as this Western white democratic country. We are made up of 70% immigrants or refugees from the Middle East and Africa. We will behave exactly the way that Saudis will behave and Qataris will behave when you threaten our ideology, when you threaten our religious beliefs, our nationality, and that's to be understood. But it's not an excuse. I would never excuse it. I think it's a terrible thing if there are Jews who are spitting on Christians. I just would say that I don't think it's happening very often.
No, but this is the part of the problem for me, because when you look at it in context, you understand that Christian persecution is so huge and there is so much to talk about that it really feels that when Tucker Carlson is really putting a spotlight on Israel, not that Israel's perfect. Israel has deep issues. You've spoken about some of them already. And there's much more to go into, because Israel, guess what, is a country like any other. Like, it has problems. Like, it has corruption, it has liars, it has racist people, it has even some genocidal people in there as well. Like, you've got a whole mix, because Israel is not like I think you're right in saying that we definitely hold Israel up to this impossible standard. And the moment they make a mistake, it's like, see, they're evil, but we just don't do that to any other country.
And by the way, Ali, sorry to cut you off, but that's our fault too. That's Israel's fault too, because nobody that looks like me or talks like me is speaking for Israel. Nobody. We always choose the most Western looking and sounding Jews to represent Israel. And that's a mistake, because you don't see what Israel actually looks like on the ground via our spokespeople. Sorry, I just had to put that in as well.
That's interesting. And you know what? Some of that might be just due to, I don't know what the percentage of Mizrahi or Middle Eastern or African Jews living in Israel speak English. But if you speak English, you tend to have a European kind of connection. And then you're naturally making content to an English audience. So that could definitely happen. But when it comes to Tucker Carlson, like, there are some very, very important facts that someone needs to get through to him. And I just wanted to make something clear in this. I have a list here of countries where the Bible is restricted or banned, and Israel isn't even on the list. Okay, so let me just read some out, because these are the countries that he should be really focused on. Okay, so you got China, Brunei, Morocco, Algeria, Uzbekistan, Qatar, Yemen, Pakistan, Oman, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Sudan, North Korea, Maldives, Somalia, Libya, Eritrea, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, and I got bored making a list, but I'm sure it will continue going further. Tucker Carlson doesn't care about the Christians in those countries. He doesn't care that over the last 25 years, over 62,000 Christians in Nigeria have been butchered by Islamists. He doesn't care about all the terrorist attacks on Christians throughout Africa and how Islamists want to turn the entire continent of Africa into a Muslim caliphate. Like, there's nothing of the sort when it comes to Tucker. He seems to have this laser focus on Israel, which is why I find it absolutely bizarre when people are saying the media has been bought out by the Jews, the West is funding the Jews, the West is funding Israel. Like, they're the ones spinning the narratives.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, excuse me. And so I did want to ask you your thoughts on that, and this whole idea that the West is like just the whole world is being run by the Jews and the media is being run by the Jews, and that's where all the funding is going. Like, is there anything that you can provide that kind of dispels that myth?
I'm gonna show it to you right now, as like the way it's disingenuous and fake, everything that you're seeing and hearing. What do these, I'm not gonna even call them Christians, but these people who pretend to be Christians, like Tucker Carlson, who are floating this anti-Israel propaganda, what do they have in common with the Arab supremacists? They both ignore the atrocities happening against their own people, by their own people, to focus on Israel. Look at the Christian world. Christians have been persecuted in every single country in the Middle East. Every single one. Israel is the only one, while it's not perfect, where the Christian numbers are growing, churches are being opened every single year, and they actually have a voice. Look at the Arab world. Look at the Muslim world. Muslims are Muslims' worst enemy. More Muslims are dying per year at the hands of Muslims than by anybody else. There are millions of Muslims and millions of Arabs being killed every year at the hand of other Arab Muslims. But what do both groups do? What do the Hassan Pikers and the Cenk Uyghurs do? And what do the Mehdi Hassans do? And what do the Tucker Carlsons and Candace Owens do? They choose to turn a blind eye to the actual atrocities happening to their own people in pursuit of focusing on Israel. And this is an age-old concept, Ali, called a scapegoat. It is a scapegoat. When you can blame this group, it makes all of the things that you're seeing way easier to deal with.
As someone who lives in Israel, would you say that Christians in Israel experience more freedom and safety compared to the Christians in other parts of the Middle East?
100%.
I already know the answer,
Yeah,
but I need to hear it from you.
100%. I mean, look, again, I've done work with a lot of Christians. I have one of the biggest videos on Messianic Judaism in Israel, which I really got to infiltrate deeply into Christian communities in Jerusalem. And I, behind the scenes spoke to them about their struggles. It's not simple to be a Christian in Israel. Jews do discriminate against Christians in Israel mostly because there's not a lot of relationship between Jews and Christians. And there's sort of in the Jewish circles, there's a lot of trauma by Christians, which is understandable for over 1,000, 2,000 years that Christians put on the Jewish people. So a lot of Jewish people don't even really know many Christians, but if they do, they're like not so open to it. So it does happen. Jews do discriminate against Christians, but the type of discrimination is nowhere near what you see in the Middle East. I don't justify it, but I'm just saying here we actually coexist. Like here, there's plenty of Christians that are living openly in their own bubbles. They're enjoying their life. Yeah, they're never going to feel, I would say, 100% like as if it was a Christian country with specifically Christian values. But come on, when we compare it to Egypt, how there's an attack every other day on a Coptic church, one of the most ancient Christian communities, or right now what was going on in Syria since the fall of Bashar al-Assad, and you just see Christian communities, Druze communities, Alawite communities being massacred, butchered, and no one bats an eye.
Yeah. Well, and so basically my conclusion is, if you're more concerned about some instances of Jews spitting on Christians in Israel, which is bad, which is disrespectful, which shouldn't happen. But if you're more focused on that and obsessing over that, then you are talking about the Christian persecution and butchering and massacring that is happening either north or south or east or west of Israel, which is in its thousands of Christians being butchered, families being blown up, children being taken as sex slaves for Islamist terrorists across Syria, across that whole region, all the way into Libya and Africa, all across Africa and Egypt. If you're more concerned over that, then you've got your completely priorities askew. And to me, it's kind of showing some of the bias from Tucker Carlson. So,
and by the way, Ali, I'd love to just interject this one point. I have a serious bone to pick with Christians in the West on this point. And I think it's really important for every Christian who's listening to this to understand this. In pursuit of Judeo-Christian values in the West, y'all, unfortunately, have forgotten and abandoned your Christian brothers and sisters in the Middle East. When we talk about conservatism in the West and we talk about Christian values in the West, they are never included in the conversation. Neither are Maronite Christians from Lebanon or Assyrian Christians, Iraqi Christians, the Chaldeans, who are an ancient group of people, some of the first followers of Jesus, the Armenians. They are never considered in the conversation. They are never part of the conversation. They are never part of the debate. If you want to win the hearts and minds of the people of the Middle East, the Christians of the Middle East, you want to make a difference. And every Christian needs to hear this out. Every conservative, if you're a Jew or you're a Zionist, you need to start including the Christians of the Middle East in your conviction. Because the longer we ignore them, the more nuns that Tucker Carlson brings on will start speaking for us, speaking for the people of the Middle East, and making us all look like a bunch of buffoons.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a good point. And it's, one of the other things about, what we talked about earlier when it comes to Arab colonization is the simple fact that vast regions of what we now call the Middle East were once Christian. And what happened to those Christian communities was utter bloodshed when the Islamist conquest came, when Muhammad and those who came after him, who took that lead of military rule, absolute bloodshed. And we are talking about millions of Christians being killed or forcibly converted, and churches destroyed, and culture lost, and all of that kind of Christians taken into slavery. And it happened across the entire region. And not a lot of people realize that up until recently, Lebanon was Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Syria was majority Christian. You've got Egypt, which was one of the bedrocks of Christianity. You've got the entire region there that was Christian.
Cities like Bethlehem, Nazareth, they were a majority Christian. They're now a majority Muslim.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that was discussed in the Tucker Carlson interview. And he mentioned that, the Christian population has now dropped, and he was blaming Israel for that. He's blaming the Jews for that. And I don't know if you've looked into the data or anything, but is he getting that incorrect? Is it really the Jews' fault that the Christians have disappeared there?
For example, in Nazareth, it's an interesting story. I'll give the Nazareth equation first, and then I'll give the Bethlehem one next. In Nazareth, I would blame Israel, and actually Israel is at fault, but not because they did it on purpose, but because after the War of Independence, what had happened was, for example, the mayor of Nazareth at the time, instead of fighting the Israeli forces that were conquering the land and starting to set it up as an independent Israeli nation, instead of fighting them, the mayor of Nazareth said, "We will join you. We will be one of the villages, one of the cities who will join Israel." They didn't want to fight. So he actually, because he's Christian, he submitted to Israel and said, "We're going to be a part of Israel." What had happened was many Arab villages around in the surrounding area, some of which were Muslim, then moved into the periphery of Nazareth and became a part of Nazareth when Israel established it as a state. So actually you see an immediate rise in Islamic numbers or Islamic immigration, Muslim population numbers, right after 1948 in Nazareth. And then it just starts because Muslims make way more babies than Christians, just always. You see this massive spike in Muslim population in Nazareth, and that's how Nazareth essentially became a Muslim city. And now Muslim gangs are controlling Christians in Nazareth and abusing them and oppressing them pretty openly. It's like I've actually made a video about this in Nazareth. It's a pretty terrible situation where the Christians can't really 100% lift their heads up above the Muslim supremacy there. In Bethlehem, it's a little bit different. In Bethlehem, I would actually put the blame on Christians in the West. This was a city that was relinquished or given back to the Palestinians. There was no attempt made by any Christian groups anywhere in the world to preserve the Christian heritage of Bethlehem in the face of Palestinian ideology. We know and we've known since 48 that Palestinian ideology is Islamic supremacy and Arab supremacy. Like it or hate it. There can be good things about Palestinians, but that's the ideology. There was never an attempt by Christians in the West to safeguard this place as a Christian holy site and keep it inherently Christian. And I really think that's why it's fallen to the hands of Islamic supremacists. And when I went to Bethlehem 10 years ago, you were seeing pictures of Yasser Arafat plastered all over Bethlehem. Come on. There's no Christian values in Yasser Arafat. That has nothing to do with Bethlehem.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the facts that I wanted to correct from Tucker Carlson, who did say that Christians were declining in Israel broadly, but also especially in Bethlehem and those kinds of places. And I found a statistic that said that basically there has been an 85% drop of the Christian population in the region since the 1950s. However, that has more to do with Islamist pressure in the region. It wasn't so much that it was actually that region coming under the authority of, was it the PLO?
The PA.
Right? The PA.
Yeah.
So actually Bethlehem being put in charge of the Palestinian authorities, that's what made it less Christian, not Israel being established. And it was just a key thing there that in the interview that I keep seeing it online, that Israel's responsible for this. And these lies are just so numerous that it's really hard to just combat all of them. Mm-hmm. Now, I also know that you have traveled extensively around Israel and have done some really great videos of it. And I saw you done a really great video recently. It might have been on your Instagram, going into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And I heard you describe it as one of your favorite places in Israel. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating building, to be honest with you. It's like a it's like a jigsaw puzzle of history.
Well, I wanted to ask you because I think it's going to be a lot of people out there that will be quite shocked to hear that a Jewish Israeli guy says that one of his favorite places in Israel is one of the most holy sites in Christianity. I was wondering if you could sort of talk us through that and what you've experienced there.
Yeah, it's really funny. Like, as a Jew, I've never felt an affinity or connection to the Western Wall. And like, this is probably going to shock a lot of people. People are like, what? Is he a Christian? Like, no, I've never felt, the Western Wall is an exterior wall of one of the exterior parts of the temple, of the ancient Jewish temple. So I've always felt it hard to find a connection to that specific wall. I only ever felt a connection there when we gather there on holidays and sing, and you have like 20, 30,000 Jews singing songs. I think that's an amazing moment to be there, and I feel connected. I've never been yet to the Temple Mount on top of Jerusalem, and I think maybe there, if I go one day, I'll feel a connection. With the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the first time I went, I immediately felt a connection because I saw Christian devotees, how important this place was to them. It's theorized to be the place where when Jesus was on the cross or when he was being pinned to the cross, also a place where he may have been buried and then rose from the dead. And there's a lot of theories about the place. There's also his tomb is there. So you can see the importance of the place by the devotees who go there, and that really speaks to me. And not only that, it's architecturally, like, it's a masterpiece puzzle of craziness. Like, you like kind of travel the world inside of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, because there's a Ethiopian part, there's an Armenian part, there's a Georgian part, a Greek Orthodox part, a Roman part, and every corner you turn, there's a little cave or a grotto you can go down, and I love it. It's like it's a very, very, very fascinating place.
Mm. And when you go there, is it something that's open to non-Christians to go there as well? Because I've never been, and it's one of the places that I want to go most in my life before I die.
You've never been?
The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've never been.
Wow, you have to go, Ali.
I've not been to Israel yet.
We have to get you here. What? I didn't know that. That's amazing. You got to come here.
I've never been to Israel, and I go to Greek Orthodox Church, so it's for me it's one of the big ones to go to.
Wow, you have to come here. You'll love it. Yeah. First of all, yes, it's open to everybody. The Christian quarter, specifically in Jerusalem, in my opinion, is one of the coolest quarters. I don't really like the Jewish quarter that much either, because it's way newer looking. It's been revamped a lot because it was destroyed. I think it was like 200 years ago. It was ransacked. So a lot of the buildings in the Jewish quarter are newer construction. The Christian quarter, Muslim quarter, and Armenian quarter have retained very, very ancient structures. So specifically the Christian quarter, everywhere you walk, there's like a tunnel underground or some grotto or a aquifer, a cistern, like incredible buildings. And yes, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is no exception, and it's a place you could go and wander and get lost. Doesn't matter what faith you're from. They don't check you at the door. You just walk in. Same thing with the Western Wall, by the way. The only place that they check your religion before you go up is the Al-Aqsa Mosque or the Dome of the Rock. It's the only place where they discriminate based on religion, who can come in.
Isn't that interesting though? Because that's man. Every time we get into this, it does seem that there's so much projection coming out, and I just keep thinking about the Tucker Carlson interview, because it's just constant projection that, they had to build a wall and there's checkpoints now, and now it's really hard. It's like, well, yeah, but why did they build that? It's like, because the Islamists are causing all the terrorist attacks, and you need to do some kind of security measures for the benefit of everyone. And there's this idea that we can't get permits, and like it's really difficult to travel here and there. But it's like, well, yeah, but look at the Al-Aqsa. Like you just can't get there unless you're a Muslim. Like that's segregation, is it not? And look, from a theological perspective, like I understand why, but from like an outsider perspective, like why is no one talking about that and everyone's talking about the other thing?
No, Ali, I'm sorry, I don't understand it. From a theological perspective, I can respect it, but I don't understand it. In Judaism, where Islam and Christianity both come from, it has never stated in the history that temple or that spot was ever supposed to be for one group of people. The temple, the ancient temple, is for all nations. Yes, there were certain rules about certain people who are out there or allowed to enter certain chambers, like high priests, which is totally understandable as well. But this was a temple. This is a spot for all of humanity. To come and say we are the supreme religion, we are the supreme race, and only we are allowed to be here is insanity. It's actual apartheid. And by the way, if we're going to go a deeper level into it, the people who control the Temple Mount is the Jordanian Waqf. It's the same people who are occupying Jordan. It's the same family.
Wow.
Really? It's unbelievable.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, look, I could spend a lot of time talking about the various forms of projection that we are witnessing, and all the things being accused of Israel really just being more true when it comes to like a whole heap of other places. But I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about the kind of naivety to Islam, particularly in the West, and what we're seeing growing at the moment, because we are seeing major sort of Islamist movements and even terrorist organizations really take hold across the West, and a lot of people coming into the West who are from Islamic backgrounds and who want to destroy the place. I mean, look at Australia. We just recently had one of our most famous bridges in Sydney just completely shut down by the Palestinian movement, by people shouting that this bridge is ours. Like, these are people that have just arrived in the country from those countries and are saying that this is ours now. And I just can't imagine if that was an Israeli guy doing it, or even a white Australian guy saying it, that this is our bridge, we built it. Like, he'd be booed out of the country. Like, oh, you know, you're a racist, you're a colonizer. But the moment the kind of it's tagged along with the Palestinian cause, like, we're all okay with it all of a sudden. Can you make sense of what's happening at the moment and why there's been such a big unfettered growth of these radical movements in the West, and why we're so worried about, you know, saying anything about it?
Absolutely. We have told white people in the West for the last 10 years. You know, I'm 29, so I grew up on the internet, and especially I became a man on the internet the last, like, let's say 10, 15 years. And I've watched this cultural shift in the last 10, 15 years, watching conservatives and leftists battle it out in the online sphere. And I've watched how we as a society, as a global community, have decided to demonize white people, to demonize Europeans in the name of colonialization and all the bad things that Europeans, yes, did do, and just tell them that they're nothing. They're terrible. They're horrible people. You should be ashamed of your white culture or your European roots. You should be ashamed of your colonization. You should be ashamed of the fact that you live in Australia and live in the UK and live in France, and you should give all this up in pursuit of having a backwards ideology filled with, unfortunately, cave people come and take over your society. And because we've accepted that as the status quo, we're seeing this shift. We're seeing white people, or whatever the hell white people means, I don't even like that term, but people of European ancestry, we're seeing them just lose every meaning of what it means to be a person. Like, they feel bad about themselves. They feel bad about standing up for themselves. They feel bad about being proud of their history and their culture. And they say, well, we wronged these people in the past, so we got to just let them immigrate here in mass and destroy our country. And by the way, I go and scan Instagram comments of videos like this often to see, like, what is the actual thing. And I think Instagram is a pretty good place without a lot of bots on the internet. It's not like Twitter or other places or TikTok. And when you go on posts of, let's say, European people complaining about mass immigration in their country, the whole comment section is filled with people from Pakistan and Morocco and all these different countries, and they're in there and they're saying, well, this is what you get. This is our payback. We're coming to get you. You ruined our country, so we're coming to ruin yours now. And they're doing it with pride. They're doing it and they're laughing in your face. And you're sitting there as people of European ancestry in Europe and whatever country, and you're looking at them and you're saying, well, come on in. Welcome. There's room for all of us here. And they're saying, no. There's room for me and my ideology here, and I'm going to win.
Yeah. So you recently did a reaction video to Tommy Robinson, and he's a very controversial figure in the UK. The entire establishment is against him. They tried to imprison him. When you grow up in the UK, or if you grew up in my generation, you were kind of raised to hate him without ever watching a video from him, ever hearing what he had to say. And I was someone like that in my teenage years. And it wasn't until probably around 2017, 2018, I started listening to what he had to say. And I was like, oh my goodness, this guy has been raising the flag, like ringing the alarm bells over something that is so huge. How could it be that we've turned him into an absolute villain? This guy is like basically sacrificing him and his family's life to speak out against something that is a threat to so many people in the UK. And I think finally he's being vindicated. But I was wondering, if I could get your thoughts as someone who's in Israel, and I view Israel as a very strong country that recognizes its threats. How do you view the UK right now? It seems like it's just going up in smoke. Like me and my family, we had to leave that place. It's going up in smoke. It's villainizing those that are trying to save the country, and it's giving essentially like free accommodation and payments and welfare to those that are coming in like from the get-go who don't always have the best intentions. What's your impression of the place right now?
By the way, I had a very similar experience with Tommy. Like, like growing up, when I was 17, I started traveling around the world. A lot of my couple early years traveling I spent in the UK. I lived in and around London, and I made a lot of friends in more liberal circles in London and in the UK. And because I was a part of this travel vlogging world, like I said, it was always way more liberal. So I came on to Tommy Robinson early when I was young, and I kind of agreed with the stuff he was saying because I understood Islamism as a Middle Eastern person, but I always rejected it because the peers that I was around were like, if they knew that I was listening to this guy or like listening to Ben Shapiro behind the scenes in secrecy in my hostel, I would be like, oh, get this guy out of here. He's disgusting. But I was kind of listening and I was like, well, he's saying the truth. Like, I know this from Israel. I know that my parents grew up around this. My grandparents grew up around this. Yeah. So I had the same exact thing with Tommy Robinson. And only recently I started listening to him again. And I was like, oh my God, he was so right. And I was even doing a reaction video to him today. And I see his conviction and I'm like, bro, my heart goes out for this guy. He gave up everything. He inspires me in a certain perspective. He gave up the safety of his family because he's talking about future generations. I see so much inspiration for that because I'm doing what I do also now and giving up a lot of my own comfort for my kids and my kids' kids because I see the vision. So when I look at what's happening in the UK, which, by the way, an incredible country with incredible people and, yes, incredible culture, besides all the colonization and even wrongs that they did to Israel, yes, I've traveled extensively England and Wales. I haven't done Scotland and Ireland yet, Northern Ireland, but you know, I love this nation, and I think the people there are inherently very good and good intending people. And it's sad to see that there's almost like, and I see this as a symptom all over Europe, there's this lack of motivation to fight for what's yours, to fight for your land. Why allow, for example, Pakistani grooming gangs to roam around the UK and do horrific, I don't even want to say what, to women, to white girls because they're white and because they're Pakistani, and then have police cover it up and be okay with that? How can you sleep at night if you're not fighting against that? When you see the tides turning in your country, and we look at, for example, what's happening in America with Zoran Mamdani about to win the mayoral, I'm positive he's going to win. It seems like the tides are turning in America as well. I think you see this lack of motivation to fight for your country, for your home.
Yeah. There does seem to be this huge kind of, there's like this toxic pacifism is the only way I can kind of describe it, where there's this sort of, I mean, growing up in the UK, all we've really had over the last 20 to 30 years, especially was during Tony Blair's time, was this message of diversity is our strength, just constantly. Diversity is our strength. And look, like, you know, there can be great things that come from diversity. Like I wouldn't, like, my dad's from Iran, my mum's from England, lived in the UK. Like there's stuff like that can come about that is good, right? But that's not the backbone of a country. Like the idea that, I think I heard someone else say it this way, like the idea that like white people were just like choking on their own homogeneity until diversity showed up and saved them all from their own whiteness is such a stupid idea. And the actually it's a lot of the time it is the unity that is the strength. Is how can you integrate, how can you work together? And there has been a lot of integration of various different communities in the UK. But, you know, like we've just talked about, there is this sort of form of radical Islam that sees itself as absolutely supreme over everything, whose worldview says that the entire world will one day be conquered underneath their foot, and the whole world will be on Sharia, and they go with that intention. And so integrating is out of the question, you know, and so it isn't working. But it has been really sad to see how the UK, you know, a people who just like, what, 2 generations ago fought off the damn Nazis, you know, who fought them off, now being just completely demasculated, just completely like wet puppies who just don't know how to like do anything or don't know how to fight off anything. It's really, really sad to see. And it's like, well, here in Australia, we've had this whole thing where like, you know, Australia is a white colonial project. This isn't our country. Like it was always the Aboriginals' land. And so that's happening here. But it's like, well, if that's the case, and all these people coming to Australia are just like occupiers of Aboriginal land, why are you so in favor of bringing in more people from these Middle Eastern countries? Why are you in favor of that? Surely they would just become the new colonizers of the country. You know, if it's not Aboriginal, if it's not, like, how is that helping anyone? And so look, I don't know how we're going to go ahead with this. And unfortunately, I do think that the more we kick the can down the road in dealing with this, the bigger the pressure cooker is going to get, and it's going to explode in really violent ways. And what you're going to see is like moderate people who are typically not very political, that were fine for a long, long time, they're going to start getting aggravated by this, and then they're going to start joining in whatever this materializes in the future. Whereas I think the solution maybe just to have like a firmer approach with policing when it comes to Pakistani gangs and those kinds of things. In the same way that I guess Israel has had a firm hand when it comes to the way it deals with terrorists, you know.
Because we know. Because we know. I think like the West, unfortunately, or fortunately, has not dealt with terrorism enough. In Israel, it's all we know. It's all we know. And if you go back before the state was created, it's generational trauma of terrorist acts against our people. Whether you were from Ethiopia or from Iraq or from Syria or from Poland. We all dealt with it. That's the one thing that brings us all together here in Israel is we know no matter where we were living, we all dealt with the same exact persecution. So we know firsthand what it means to fight for your life, to fight for your survival. The reason why there will never be a Palestine over Tel Aviv, I mean, inshallah, it won't ever happen. But like the reason why it won't happen is because we will fight to the death. We will fight until the very end because we know what it means to be conquered by these people, to be under their foot. We know what that means. Unfortunately, in the West, many of you don't. Many of you have no idea what that's like. And it hurts me because we could be ringing the alarm bells and saying, hey, please, wake up, please. For our sake, wake up. And you just say, well, don't be a racist. You can't be racist. It's like, no, it's not about being racist. It's about saving yourself.
Yeah, look, it is sad what's happening to the UK, and it does seem like there is a growing movement of people who are starting to go, okay, look, what's going on isn't okay. Like, we don't like the racist extreme of the kind of nationalist front movements. We don't want that. We just want a sensible conversation around immigration and how we're going to approach policing of issues, and we don't like the political correctness that has stifled everything. And so, look, I'm watching the UK carefully from afar. But it's been heartbreaking to see. But one of the things that's happened recently in the headlines is that the UK and Australia, I'm sad to say, is threatening to recognize the Palestinian state. What do you make of that?
It's like we spoke about, it's morally corrupt. It doesn't make any sense. We have to ask, like France also jumped on this bandwagon. What are the borders? What are you recognizing? What but this comes down to like the West deeply not caring about what they start. For example, the West got us into the mess of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the way that it is today. The UN vowed to fix it and never did. America has tried stepping up to the plate and vowed to fix it and never did. So did the UK and never did. And so you just see this this inept desire to say we solved it without actually solving it. And I think people are tired of seeing dead people on their screens. They're tired of the protests. They're tired of the propaganda. Instead of doing what's tough and not kicking the can down the road and saying, hey, we're going to tighten up on this propaganda machine. We're going to tighten up on the people trying to infiltrate our society and to ruin our cities and to ruin our countries. We're going to stand by our allies that are our actual allies, like Israel, that have the same values as us, that want a peace in the Middle East, that are fighting for it. Instead of standing with them, we're going to recognize Palestine with no borders, just going to recognize it. You're going to use that as a threat to our ally. Our ally is going to be threatened by that. And what are we going to do? We're going to kick the can down the road so that in 5 years we have to do this all over again when Palestine is recognized. Yeah. It's moral corrupt.
And it's funny because, like you said, like it was kind of like the West drawing up those lines on the map that have caused so many problems now, and we're all up in cahoots about how bad neo-colonialism is, right? But how is this not exactly the same thing? Like, what? Okay, so if you recognize a Palestinian state, who's the leadership? Like, is that a democratically elected leader you're now like supporting? Did you ask the people that are now under his boot whether they're okay with you recognizing it? Like, have you consulted with the people that are going to suffer because of this? Like, how is this not you causing more problems? And if anything does go wrong, like you're not going to suffer one bit. You've got no skin in the game. right?
And you're not going to pick up the pieces, are you? You're not going to do any work to fix it.
Exactly. And how is it, Great Britain, you care more about the borders of a tiny country really far away in the Middle East than your own borders? Like the UK's borders suck, like every day. Like tons of people are coming in illegally. And like the people in the UK are fed up with it. Like, but no one's talking about that. The leadership doesn't seem to care about that. Doesn't seem to be worried about policing its own borders. Instead, it wants to tell a culture and a civilization that it really doesn't understand, really far away, what to do, and only cause more problems, as we've seen over the last 50 years. You know, this is exactly like the Ayatollah of Iran being flown in by France on the France Airlines after they hosted him for a number of years in exile in France. It's like when I think was it Hillary Clinton or Obama and David Cameron walking around Libya like they've just saved the place, and now you've just got like this booming slave trade in Libya. It's like, well thank you for what the heck you just did in Libya. Well done. Now the Taliban have like hundreds of billions of dollars worth of like the latest state-of-the-art US military gear because you all decided to like abandon the place, you know, and now women aren't allowed to show two eyes. That's the latest thing from the Taliban. Just one eye is enough. And you can't study to be a doctor, and you can't go see a doctor if you're a woman, and you can't go to school. Like, this is what the West does best. You know, it's mess up the Middle East. That's what the West does best.
Yeah. And it gets lazy too. And it's moral corruption, because then you have people like, you know, you have like the woke right in America who, when we're actually on a path of liberation against the IRGC and the Ayatollahs who are oppressing the amazing, beautiful Iranian people, you have these woke rights people in America who are like, we don't want to fight a war for Israel. We don't want to die for the Jews. It's like, brother, you're a part of this issue, my brother. Yeah, you are a part of this problem. This is more your war than it is Israel's. Like you caused more of this than Israel did.
Right, exactly. And guess what? You've also got, you know, Mr. MAGA. We've also got like the IRGC coming to assassinate Trump. Like like Trump is literally having to create fake motorcades and a fake Air Force One to try and deceive the assassins of the IRGC. Like, that's happening. You've also got Iran trying to smuggling through the southern border under the guise of having like Venezuelan passports, because they've got this now new allegiance with the Venezuelan government. Like, they're coming for you, America. Like, they're coming for you. They're already in your country. They already have assassins in New York. They already have assassins in Los Angeles. Like, what are you talking about? This is not your war. Like this, they hate you the most. Don't forget, Israel is the little Satan. The USA is the big Satan. What do you? This is a trial run. This is a war game for Iran to do the main battle, which is the USA. Like, what do you think this is? You know?
The fact that the EU had to convene a meeting the week that Israel was planning on actually doing the nuclear strike, or the strike on the nuclear facilities in Iran. And they had to make calculations, because they know there are so many IRGC sleeper cells in Europe and America. There was an actual meeting convened to calculate what would be the risk of doing an attack. That's insane. That's how you know, Europe and America, you are at war. Yeah. You might not think you're at war, but they're at war with you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's happening now, and guess what, right? This is anytime I post about the Jews or Israel or about get this, anytime I post about child sexual exploitation and pedophilia and all that kind of stuff that I've covered on my show, guess what happens in the comments? Straight away, within 30 seconds, I get the little juice box emojis, which is like internet words for like the Jews. Oh, the Jews are doing it. Look at the Talmud. So they are convinced that all the weird kind of like sexualization of little children in the West and like even terrorist attacks is because of the Jews. It's like, who do you think is blowing up the Christmas markets in Berlin? Like, the Jews? Or is it
obviously Chaim and Samuel from Brooklyn?
Right. So you've got this huge problem where the West, so many people in the West just don't see it. Like you said, there is a war. They know like those guys know it's a war against you guys. Like, you guys haven't woke up to it. Like, the moment Charlie Hebdo happened, right? Where it suddenly became effectively illegal to draw a stick man of Muhammad, right, without getting beheaded. The moment that happened, every newspaper, every magazine should have published that same picture and said, no, we're not standing for this stuff. This is not how we do things here. That's not how we do things here. But instead, we just, the only thing I can describe it as is there's this weird form of toxic pacifism. I don't like violence. Like, I wish we could live in this world where we could just all get along. I desperately wish that, desperately. But what happens when you have people at your border wanting to slaughter you? What happens when you have people who want to slaughter a music festival and celebrate it and call that, like, you've seen that footage of like the Hamas guy like calling his mum on
course.
WhatsApp, you know, hey mum, I've just slaughtered some Jews. It's wonderful news. Like, this is like, I think Sam Harris described it as this like ecstatic spiritual experience. That killing Jews is akin to like a white kid from London going to like, you know, India and taking like ayahuasca or something. It's like that's the same thing for them.
But for them, Ali, it was literally fulfilling prophecy. Like they have the Hamas charter up until 2017, 18 stated that when the one day the trees and the rocks are going to call out, "Hey Jew, hey Jew," and then they found themselves in the Nova Music Festival outside of Kibbutz Re'im, running through a field of trees and rocks, killing, murdering Jews. And to them, they were all drugged up and crazy and you know, the mob rage. They're literally fulfilling Islamic prophecy. Like they're going for it. For them, Al-Aqsa flood, October 7th, was a fulfillment of a prophecy. They were fighting a religious war, not just October 7th. For them, this was the beginning of fulfilling the prophecy.
Yeah. This is jihad. This is jihad, and it isn't going to stop at Israel. You know, it's not going to stop at Israel. Look, there's so much more I want to talk about with you, but you know, we've been going for a while, and I just wanted to just sort of ask you finally, what are your words of warning to people outside of Israel that, you know, that maybe they don't see coming, that they need to be paying attention to?
You need to wake up to the people who are infiltrating your country. You know, in Israel, we're uniquely positioned to understand what this looks like because we all come from different nations who have been persecuted by different religions and different cultures. So we know, we are so traumatized, but we know what it's like. You know, I think when I was a kid, my parents prepared me for October 7th and the anti-Semitism that will come. They told me, like, people hate you because you're a Jew. And that's a hard concept to grasp as a kid. Not because they were trying to put me down, but because I had to actually watch out because I was Jewish. And so when October 7th happened and all the anti-Semitism started, I wasn't shocked. Like, it didn't blow me away. And losing all the friends and all the, you know, my life changing completely, it didn't blow my mind. I was actually kind of prepared for this as a kid. But that's a unique position to hold, and I don't think it's the healthiest. You in Europe and in the West, you are capable of waking up now. You're capable of taking the right steps. It's not too late to reverse what's happening, to offer an outside-of-the-box solution. Look at Sweden. Sweden, I think, is offering $34,000 per Syrian migrant to leave Syria and go back, or leave Sweden and go back to Syria, now that Bashar al-Assad has fallen. Because they recognize this is not working. You need to go back to where you came from, fix your country on the ground. Maybe we can assist from far away. Probably not. But, you know, you need to take care of your own. Your country, your UK, your Australia, your Sweden, your France, your America is your tribe. That is your home. That is your everything. Israel, it's good for us because it's small, so it's easier to access that idea. But that's our home. It's like a turtle without its shell. What are you without your shell? This is the place that you need to protect and fight for. If you're just going to let a pack of hooligans come in and take over, I'm sorry, Habibi, you are not a man. You are not somebody, you shouldn't be proud of yourself if you just allow your culture and your home to be erased and taken over. You need to fight for what's right, which is your place, your home.
That was the most racist thing I've ever heard, Tal. I can't believe I've interviewed you.
Well, I'm a white colonizer. What can I say?
It's been an absolute pleasure, dude. And look, you're way bigger than me on YouTube, but just in case, where can people follow you?
Everywhere on the internet at The Traveling Clad or Tal Oran, my name. You'll find me.
Awesome. Until next time, dude. Godspeed.
Thank you, brother.